Hello and welcome to my channel. This video is part 2 of my Look into Lost board games, specifically featured in vintage comic book annuals. I'll leave a link up above so you can watch part 1. Check that out first, then come back and we'll look through this gold mine. First up is the Pink Panther annual from 1984. Considering it's aimed for kids, this game is quite complicated, so I'll do my best to go through it. You actually need 3 players instead of 2. It's called The Pink Pursuit, and we're chasing a villain who has stolen some treasure. So the Inspector and Pink Panther have to try and find it. This red stone will represent the treasure, and it will be carried by the villain. It can be hidden in different locations, or it can be dropped or taken. The villain always goes first, but the other 2 players must roll a 6 before they can start. I tried this method, in the end nobody else got to play the game. So in the end, I let the villain have 3 goes first, then the other 2 started. When the villain takes his next turn, he lands on space number 8. That comes with instructions. It says the villain hides the treasure in the corpse and move to space 12. Luckily, I've already put the treasure in the right place. Now a lot of these instructions are character specific, so unless you're that character, you don't carry them out. For example, the Inspector just landed on the space which reads, the Panther or the Inspector must leave the treasure in the nearby cottage if they have it, which they do not. The Pink Panther now lands on the square with instructions for the villain, so we can ignore that. And then the Inspector rolls a 6 and finds himself off the board and without the treasure. Ironically, in this game, the only person who gets to handle the treasure is the villain. And he lands on space number 44, which reads, anybody landing on this square snatches the treasure from wherever it is and wins the game. Next up we have Masters of the Universe from 1984. This one is called Race to Castle Grayskull and is for 2 players. You're supposed to roll a 6 to start, but during my test run the second player didn't even get the start. So that rule now been abolished and his highest number goes first. Both the hero and villain player start at opposite end of the board, and they each face their own personal hazards. For example, He-Man just fell into the swamp, so he missed a turn. Skeletor on the other hand got lucky and threw again. He-Man also gets to throw again, although he doesn't get very far. It turns into a bit of a game of cat and mouse, as the gap between each player constantly increases and decreases. But overall it's He-Man who's going through a slew of bad throws. If he can keep avoiding the obstacles, he may just make it. All in all, it took me a minute and a half to play this game, so it's quite fast paced. So if you have multiple players, you can play tournament rounds, and nobody will get bored because you won't have to wait too long for your turn. And Skeletor takes Castle Grayskull, spelling doom for the turn here. Next up we have Pixie Dixie and Mr. Jinx from 1975. And this is the oldest book in my collection. This game is called The Chase Is On and is fairly straightforward. At 2 certain points in the game, you need to roll an exact number to land on the arrow square. The first one will get you onto the wheel, the second one will get you off it. And if you miss, you just go round and round and round until you eventually land on it. It took a little while, but eventually one of the players had landed on the first arrow. Naturally there's a bunch of obstacles to both help and hinder you, and in this case I just have to move back 3 spaces. And now I get to miss a turn. And the second player finally gets a stroke of luck and joins the main board. Meanwhile the other player misses the arrow and keeps on going round. But on the second pass he gets lucky and lands on the arrow. But alas, the other player overshoots the mark, and to add insult to injury, you have to step back a space. The game is pretty much one-sided now. Providing Mr. Jinx doesn't swoop down and gobble up the die, the first player's won. Providing he can roll the exact number that is, which is a single solitary 1. And it looks just like that. Next we have the A-Team Annual from 1985, and this one is called Get the A-Team. The premise is simple. You start in the blue square and you have to collect each and every member of the A-Team. Each player can choose whichever route they want to take, but once they've collected the whole team, they must return back to the blue sky in order to win. And this sounds like a job for the B team. Player 2 reaches the crossroad and decides to head down first, so he'll be pretty much collecting the team anti-clockwise. On his next turn he lands on the red square and gets to throw an extra dice. But the red squares aren't always nice, so be careful with them. Player 1 decides to head north and take a different route. Player number 2 collects the face man, which is his final character, while player number 1 still have BA left to collect, and then it's just a race to the finish line. We just need to see they can avoid all the obstacles. Right, place your bets. Player 2 is leading, but only just. Player 1 is now hovering by the finish line, just to be overtaken by player 2 at the last minute. And now we have the Mad Balls Annual from 1988, and these were some pretty ugly squishy balls back in the day. This game is called Racing Mad Balls. You're supposed to make your own counters out of the images below, but I don't need to do that, because I have my own collectible Mad Ball keyrings, and the aim of the game is to simply get to the finish line first. There are a few hazards along the way, but because we're dealing with balls, most of them let you roll forward, so that's a nice little touch. And player 2 follows the exact same route as player number 1, which includes 2 extra double moves. Some of the hazards are aimed at specific characters, so it's a good idea to learn their name before you play. I can't really read them out to you, because one of them we're not allowed to say anymore. How times have changed. Well, Oculus Orbis, which is the eyeball, he rolls a 6 and wins the game, and leaves Screaming Mimi to bite the dust. And now we have Fraggle Rock from 1983. This is called Visit the Trash Heap, and it's another game where you have to roll a 6 to start, so we're going to ignore that rule. Highest roll will instead go first. It's a simple enough game, all you have to do is get to the trash heap, but if you land on the red square you have to follow the shortcut, whether it's forwards or backwards. It doesn't take long at all for the first player to find a dirt track, and this brings him out near the trash heap. So that's a stroke of good luck, or I've spoken too soon. Well, it's slow going for a little while, after we get 3 ones in a row, and then player 1 finds another dirt track, and his curiosity sets him back a few more spaces, and this allows player number 2 to find a track of his own and get ahead a little bit, and it's rotten luck for player 1 as sent back to almost the start. And from here on in it becomes a regular game of cat and mouse, and a simple throw of the dice decides whether you win or lose. Player 1 finally catches up, and there's no more obstacles left in their way now, as player 2 reaches the trash heap. Last up we have Wizard and Chips from 1987, and we have a race game between Sweet Tooth and Greedy Greg, and the winner is the first one to collect all the sweets, so naturally this game was very appealing to 12-year-old me. And as per usual, highest number goes first, and becomes Sweet Tooth. Most of these three should be fairly recognisable. You got some rock, you got some licorice all sorts, chocolate, lollipops, bubblegum, and Greedy Greg has caught his first sweet. This should be marked off on the board with a pencil, and now Sweet Tooth nabs himself a lollipop. Greedy Greg goes back 3 spaces, and Sweet Tooth stops to have a drink and therefore misses a go, leaving Greedy Greg to nab a lollipop, and all it is now is some bubblegum. And that's your lot. That was 7 more forgotten board games from vintage comic books. If you want to see a part 3 in this series, let me know in the comments below, although that might be stretching it a little bit thin for me, but there are worse ways than spending a few hours than reading a few old comic books. And don't forget, if you see an old annual somewhere, check it out, you never know what treasure it contains. Thank you for watching. Don't forget, if I can do it, so can you.